Sometimes I'm live. This is Mark Small of Civil Discourse Now. After 9 minutes, 4:09, I was able to finally get on to the internet here. This has been a very challenging afternoon. I'm going to turn on one of the lamps here, maybe. Um, I don't think that one's going to work. I'm having fewer problems here with power and energy than people are in Texas, though. This is February. It is the 18th, I believe, of 2021. I'm broadcasting to you, streaming to you live from Broad Ripple, which is on the north side of Indianapolis in Indiana, United States of America, planet Earth. A lot has been going on today, and I'm cut off from the outside world being able to see events. Let me tell you what I know so far, and this is why I want to talk about why states should not matter. We really should do away with the notion of states as such. People always talk about how a good thing about federalism is you have states and they can come up with different ideas for things. So you can have creative approaches to what life is about. Well, that sounds kind of interesting. And if we were talking about maybe building different designs for bicycles, or like in the 60s when they were building muscle cars, there might be some kind of merit to that. But not when it comes to government, because people's rights are the same, no matter where they are. You have rights as a human being. A state has no rights. A state is a governmental entity. According to the Declaration of Independence, people are born with rights. People create states out of convenience. It's to do things because we can't really get along together completely. And so we delegate authority, power to governmental entities. States are governmental entities. Now, why is it we shouldn't have states? Well, for one thing, think about what states stood for in the beginning. We had 13 colonies, became 13 states, and they negotiated in Philadelphia in 1787 to write a constitution. And the compromises they reached to ratify that constitution, to write it, to submit it to the states to be ratified. The compromises all were around different things related to power, but the big compromise had to do with slavery. I know that's a word a lot of people don't want to hear today. I didn't have anything to do with slaves. Actually, if you're white, you've really benefited an awful lot from slavery. Everybody has in this day and age, to the extent that we have a lot of things that have been handed down to us material-wise. So we really, this country was based upon certain types of productivity. We had agricultural groups. We had, I don't know that many of them were corporate entities at that point yet, but there were large plantations, for example, in the South that harvested certain crops that were labor intensive. And so as a consequence, slavery was cheap. You didn't have to pay the people anything. And they are actually worth something. You could buy them and sell them. So we had this horrible, evil institution, slavery. And there were compromises made about it so that the Constitution could be passed out of the convention in Philadelphia. The concern was, in trying to get everybody to be under the Union, that the southern states wouldn't join with us. And the southern states, there were more states that recognized slavery then than we kind of think of today. There were more. And later there were fewer because states in the North realized how abhorrent the concept of slavery was. But the notion was that the states of the Deep South or the South, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, that they might not join with the other states, and that would weaken us. Militarily, we wouldn't be as imposing of a presence, although right then we weren't very imposing of a presence anyway. And economically, we wouldn't be able to compete on a world stage because we wouldn't have as broad of a vista. Because really, the people of the Constitutional Convention were also thinking about moving west and taking as much land as they could from the people who already lived there. They weren't Indians. They were indigenous peoples who lived under various names. They had names for themselves. We called them Indians. We, meaning people who came here from Europe. We called them Indians because the people who first got here thought that they were in India. They thought they were getting close to India because that's where they were sailing for. And so they called the people who lived here Indians. They weren't Indians. They were very many different tribes and peoples. So anyway, slavery was in our Constitution. It was a part of our basic history back then. And the states were the means by which slavery was protected. Now, we think today of states' rights as being a reason for the Civil War. Not so much. The 4 states that had secession statements, South Carolina, they're always in there for nutso shit. Sorry about saying shit. South Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, and Texas had secession statements. And none of them mentioned states' rights. They mentioned how the states were being told by the other states, and by this time we're talking about 1860 to 61, how they were being told by northern states what they were supposed to do. And they resented it, and they thought that it was bad for the northern states to do that. And I'm trying to find the secession statements, because what I was doing earlier today was trying to deal with setting a new lineup on the computer. And so it's being kind of hectic and kind of scrambled. The thing is, I'm not with the evil empire anymore, so that's kind of good. But I had to get different speed on the internet, and so I got that done right before I started streaming on here. And this morning when I got up, I'm listening to how, in a couple of days ago, people were saying, well, green energy is why Texas, all those people down there are cold and freezing and dying. No, green energy didn't have anything to do with it. Windmills work in Greenland and Scandinavia. And the thing that Texas didn't do, okay, so here's the problem with states. So Texas thought, to prove that there are such independent people down there, and they hate the federal government, they opted out of being in the nationwide grid for energy. Because they did that, they dropped a lot of regulations on energy producers. Now, the energy producers saved money, and they were able to make bigger profits, and people got cheaper energy. But there was no profit incentive for those energy producers to plan for something like a really bad winter like they're having down there right now, that they should have foreseen because they had a really bad winter in 2011. So when you have private enterprise that's focused on just profit, that's what happens. They don't care about people. So the state, Texas, wasn't on the grid, and now what's happening? Well, either we let them die down there, or the federal government has to come to their assistance and their aid. I can tell you that that's really kind of a consistent theme for people who believe in states as repositories of something. is that they'll stumble, they'll fall, and then they look to the rest of us to help. Now, that's where you get into a definition of socialism, because they'll accuse people who believe that the federal government should be large enough and have enough resources and have enough power to be able to help people. Say, oh, a government that's powerful enough to give you everything you need is powerful enough to take everything away. Barry Goldwater said that. What does that mean? Of course, a government that's that powerful could crush you anyway. It's a dictatorship potentially, as we just saw. So let's back up what's happening in Texas. They thought they could save money. The people who held the shares of those corporations, energy providers, realized they could make bigger profits. They pulled out of the grid. Now people are dying. They tried to point a finger at the green energy. Say, well, the wind, the turbine failed. No. The windmills didn't fail. Those are lies. And the real failure was the Republican elected officials in Texas decided that their state could pull a cute one and get by on the cheap. And it came back and hit everybody in Texas in the face. Not Ted Cruz. I heard that he just had gone to someplace in Mexico for a vacation. He blamed his daughters. That's another thing that GOP leaders have a tendency to do, is blame others, not take responsibility for themselves. So that's what's happened in Texas. And that's why states really aren't repositories of rights, and they're not places where we can come up with new ideas for things. And the biggest example now, and we've seen it for about a year, has been in fighting COVID. We wouldn't fight an invading enemy in a war with individual states uncoordinated, deciding to fly their state's colors on pennants and go into battle against whomever. Wouldn't do it. That's what we did at the beginning of 2020 to address COVID. Donald Trump is responsible for hundreds of thousands of deaths through his ineptitude. The people who were working for him and carrying those things out, Jared Kushner especially, since he was supposed to be in charge of things, they are just as culpable for those deaths as Reinhard Heydrich, for example, was for deaths during World War II in Germany. Those people were inept to the point of almost belligerently and intentionally wanting people to die. And if you don't think that, look at the expression on Trump's face whenever he gets angry and he starts getting vengeful towards people. So that's a good example of why we don't want to have individual states handling things, because you have Florida where people are dying, and dying by the hundreds and by the thousands. You have states where there are shutdowns, but nothing is coordinated. It hasn't been until now, and we're starting to see coordination. So we have to reconsider what this whole thing is about states, particularly since that's the means by which the Republican Party has been able to maintain a hold on the federal government, ironically, and maintain power even though it's had a minority of votes. Candidate that's held the office, the Oval Office, except for one election since 1988, from the Republican Party, had fewer votes than their main opponent. So that's what we're looking at here. We're looking at a power structure in which a minority maintains its control through gamesmanship and states. So that's what I have to say today. I'll have things pulled together more adeptly tomorrow in terms of lighting and in terms of the computer setup. I'm Mark Small. I don't even have my message for the day to Vladimir Putin. I'm sorry, because I normally try to say Yevat Tebya. I think that's what I say. And also, we have our decoder rings. And those of you who've received the decoder rings, we'll be sending out messages soon. We're going to be meeting in the basement of a pizzeria. I won't say in what part of DC, but I think you know. I'm Mark Small, Civil Discourse Now. Be back tomorrow. And people can call in. There's a number. It's like, wait. Oh, that's right. I had to point opposite than what I see on the screen. So the number is right there. And you can call in tomorrow. We'll talk to you then. Take care.